All right. Over the course of this past 3v3 season, as well as half of the last 3v3 season, I've taken a special interest in some 3v3 defense theory crafting, some team building, but more specifically on the modding side. I think a lot of people will see these teams up here in front of me, and we've all seen these teams plenty, right? But there's been some really, really powerful findings that I've had. Don't even necessarily know if I'm the first one, but certainly I don't see a whole lot of other people using these. And the results have been kind of staggering. 3v3 is not my favorite mode. I am very vocal against 3v3, but I am going to be completely honest with you. I kind of like 3v3 now just because of how good I feel about these teams and how much fun I have had watching these teams succeed. You'll notice right off the bat that there isn't really, this is all focused on mostly older characters. Luke is in the mix here as a newer character, and we do have a version of Jedi Master Luke to work with. But for the most part, this is a fairly old core, but yet this is broadly what I've actually been basing most of my defense around. I guess to give you all an idea, I have not been cleanly cleared once in 5 weeks of Grand Arena rounds. And this is with a defensive setup that is actually broadly cheese. And when I say cheese, I'm talking about I'm holding Grievous for offense. I'm holding Nites's for offense and posting you typically have like a weird Asajj, Talia, Spirit leftover core that isn't really achieving a whole lot. We're talking Rebel Officer Leia Organa levels of cheese, right? And yet this defense has still been absolutely crushing it. I think part of it is just it's incredibly deceptive. It's deceivingly strong. It's so incredibly easy to look at some of these and think it's not that big of a deal. This first one especially, honestly, we're just gonna jump right into it. This team has been the star of the show for me, without a doubt. The kill list of teams that this team has gone through is insane. Obviously, everyone uses this team, but the thing that makes this special here is the CLS modding. This is what I have referred to in a lot of places trying to spread the word as Bruiser CLS. So you'll notice here that we have a crit avoidance arrow, protection primary on the triangle, tenacity primary on the cross, and then this is, for the longest time, I didn't have a good protection primary circle, so I had a health that I just used. You can see the stat line. It's fine. I recently picked up this one and swapped into it on the last season. This did a lot of its work with the health primary. I would personally prefer the protection, but interchangeable. But definitely, I would kind of prefer to be on this one. But this is, I know a fairly fast crit avoidance arrow. Ki Adimundi mission has kind of got more people thinking about crit avoidance, so maybe you have a little bit more room to play with now. Maybe you got 15, 13 speed sitting around, hopefully. But this is the core. And the reason why this ends up being so good, you can see we have crit avoidance at 35%. We're getting 15% extra from Chupio. And when he's in that defensive stance, we're getting another 50% on top of that. And then, this normally isn't that much tenacity. But with his middle Zeta, with the Learn Control Zeta, which has actually quickly become my favorite Zeta for him to build around, you have that 200% tenacity. So, easy example right off the bat. This team has held against Vader Piet Watt. Vader obviously having incredibly hard time dealing with 100% critical avoidance, all of that extra tenacity, as well as you can see down here that whenever Luke resists, he gets 5% health and protection back. This means that he is suddenly a very, very good duelist. You have him exposing on counterattacks, Chupio exposing with him on counterattacks, but even Chupio isn't necessarily core to this either. I have seen him firsthand in watching other people's streams attacking him. Watch him carve through ridiculous 2v3 matchups and still come out on top. Cannot say enough about this team. 2PO and C3PO, the modding I'm not too in depth on. This even probably wasn't that great of a choice. It was a 19 speed that I had chucked on. The crit avoid arrow I would say is important, and the potency cross I would say is important. You could potentially go a route of, maybe going like speed potency, but you still want the crit avoidance, you go the potency, you go the protection, kind of the same mods as CLS. You could kind of mirror that potentially, do something along those lines. But yeah, his damage for a lot of this season, I had him locked in with crit damage modding, and I really don't think it's the way to go. I think you just want him to stay bulky, and you want him to potentially, be able to contribute with some potency in there. But yeah, really had some good results there. And then the one thing, I did go a week or two testing some other builds, but really, if you want security against the most counters possible, you do want some extra speed on C3PO here. It's just going to be speed potency is all it is. And not even necessarily the best mods on him. I think it's just going to be about 303 to kick things off. You don't have to give him crazy investment. Just try to get some speed in there where possible, right? But yeah, just as fast as you're willing to give him, really, that's up to you. You could easily go higher than this. You could easily go lower than this. I have run him lower than this for a while and still had good results. But there are a couple of counters creeping in the wings that I think do kind of certainly encourage you to get a faster C3PO, so I would certainly say to keep that in mind. Moving right along, this is a team I'm still a little bit iffy on its overall cost. And this isn't even necessarily one that I was always posting on defense, but it's a fun team to threaten. Because the common theme that I like to run with all of these teams is they're built to make your opponent feel uncomfortable knowing either that they're there or that they could be there. A lot of these teams, I see them as bottom front strategies where you want them to have to tackle it without knowing what's behind them. It's kind of what's so devious about them, because if you place them in the rear, if they've got perfect information on what's left, then they can potentially throw an overkill that will solve it. But you place it up front, that can cause some real discomfort. So, Luke Shaak+, not exactly a rare thing. I do kind of like having the 350 plus bars to aim for, which is expensive, but Shaak+ does have that extra base speed to kind of help you get there. And then just as a fun adaptation to stop, I have lost Jedi Knight Luke teams in the past to something like, a Vader with a Han stunning the Shaak+ is perfectly viable as a counter. We have General Kenobi in the mix, so that if they do try to go the Han route of stunning Shaak+, they will instead just get stuck with the GK taunt, and then, Vader can bypass taunts, but then if they go with like a Vader choke, they crit Luke. Luke suddenly gains crit immunity and then makes Vader's life a lot harder to be able to assassinate him. And then with Luke, I don't think the technicals are really that important. And with General Kenobi, I just kind of left him with whatever mods you have on with Padme. I don't think there's too much to worry about there, but yeah, just crit damage, the speed could be flexible. I didn't really worry about lowering his speed too much because, again, I wanted this to be flexible. There were certainly plenty of times where I was holding him on offense for potentially fighting a Kylo. So you don't really want to overcommit to the strategy. I think the main goal here is just having this Shaak+ with General Kenobi supporting her to try to trip things up a little bit. I still think that like a good triumvirate could probably eat that team for more value than it's worth placing on defense. But I have pulled Galactic Legend successfully with this team just from the intimidation factor alone. So yeah, your mileage may vary, but I feel pretty good about it. Moving right along, this is a fairly simple concept, but I am repeating this just because I have personally fought opponents where if they just took some of their mods on their Revan and some of their mods on their Malak and they switched them, then they would already be doing this and it would have made my life a lot harder. So this is going to be very exorbitant on speed in my example, but the concept is still the same regardless. We have, of course, the idea of fast Malak. Now I know 351, 350 is going to be higher than a lot of you can run. Hopefully, if you've gotten some good luck with your 6D through A slicing, then this actually might be within reach of a lot of people nowadays. Fast mods are kind of starting to become a common thing. It's nice. It's really nice because I cannot tell you enough. I say this a lot. This team is, for the most part, the closest that you can get to Galactic Legend's power without necessarily like, being a Galactic Legend itself. This team has gotten some absurd value on defense, and a lot of the time, this team alone feels like if you're 3 versus 3 on Galactic Legends, this feels like a fourth team. It's either a fourth team or it's just an automatic -20 banners because they're going to feel like they have to pull. So, of course, we have the 350 Darth Revan alongside. That's really all the concept of the team is. I have had someone, mirror their Darth Revan against mine, and it's possible, I cut down my Basilisk speed pretty heavily just because I didn't want this team to just suck every mod up that I possibly had. And I think that, maybe if you wanted to really just commit on this team, a fast Basila, if your Basila outspeeds theirs, could, try to shore that up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that Vader mod guide that I put out, the setup beats it. The one thing I will say is, of course, if you try to do this setup but your speed isn't quite there, you do start to get into worry of like, well, if their Revan's faster, they could just hold and take care of yours. If they see that you're running fast Malak, that's a viable response. Or, if we're talking about speeds getting a little bit too low, maybe a Vader can try to come in with a Watt ahead of time. Or more commonly, I think like if a Shaak T can go first. Yeah, even with the Bastila nerf though, I think Jedi Knight Luke against Darth Revan might just be kind of insane now that Bastila, for the most part, can't really disable Luke as well. If her fear happens to land on Luke, then just nothing happens now. Like, you just don't get the damage debuffs at all, and that's pretty wild. But hey, that's a 50-50, and that's a little bit unpredictable, and we like unpredictability in our defense. It just makes things even more uncomfortable for our opponents. So, something that's worth keeping in mind. Yeah, you can run that, absolutely. Highly recommend. It's done quite well for me. Moving right along, you'll see we have a open third slot. This is JML with Fast GAS. JML, normally known for being not necessarily as desirable on defense. I promise you, though, if you have the opportunity to run this team, there's a few conditions to worry about here. It is fantastic. This right here, we'll see if we can get it both on screen at once. A little bit hard. Okay. The bread and butter that we have here is we want our speed to be high, higher than you will typically run gas, and you'll notice right off the bat, we're not really running traditional gas modding, right? Really all we're trying to focus on here, this 309 isn't necessarily a hard threshold. I just got him, stupidly fast. This doesn't have to be a 25 or anything. And this potency does kind of boost his damage up a little. It just helps you land your days. But for the most part, all we really care about is the speed and the 100% crit chance. So what's happening here is we are essentially using gas as a buffer against teams like Darth Revan. Honestly, just almost every team. This team has a absurdly safe matchup list, and that's part of what's been so powerful about it. And with every other team that I've talked about so far, this is a frontline strategy. You use this bottom front to put pressure. This is a trap team. This is a team where the two main counters, well, let's call it three. Sith Eternal Emperor will walk over this team. If you see Sith Eternal Emperor possibly being on offense, I wouldn't even bother posting it. Value-wise, you're just throwing away way too much. Faster opposing Jedi Master Luke should have a pretty easy time. Or if they don't have it faster, Jedi Knight Revan, with that opening tenacity lead with enemy Jedi Knight Luke, or Jedi Master Luke, does beat this team pretty easily. But that's about it. This is held against everything else. Even Rey potentially gets held against here. And for third, it's actually a pretty flexible slot. Old Ben. You could go Barris. You could go Grandmaster Yoda. I've kind of liked having them flexible. Jolie is also like, eh. The problem with Jolie is I still think you kind of want this extra doubling down on mind tricks, kind of pushing your team to their next turn sooner so that you start chipping out that true damage. You start getting gas, pushing those extra cooldown reductions. This team has held against even things that I thought would beat it, like a Supreme Leader Kylo with Watt. I guess it is possible that they did try to do something weird like weapon tech. I don't know that for certain. But at least for now, with the intel that I have, or with the GSC Majesty that we have, this team is incredibly deadly. And if you can do something, I won a couple of matches even just by posting Kylo Ren up front, just completely softball Kylo Ren, knowing that they would probably use Jedi Master Luke against it. You place this team rear, it was just an auto win. I had a couple opponents just see that and just pretty much immediately give up. Fantastic team. Cannot recommend it enough. Again, a little bit difficult to hit that modding, and I wouldn't necessarily worry about the potency either. But if you can fit that in, even with any of these teams, if you can fit one of these in, you're already in great shape. If you can start running 2 or 3 or all of them, then you are, yeah, it feels gross. And then this last one, maybe not as creative as the others, but this is just something that I have kind of noticed. Just kind of looking at the Nute meta and just looking at, I didn't really feel great about a whole lot of Nute Dooku implementations. This is fairly expensive from a team perspective, but the way that the rest of this team has been performing, it felt like it opened up the ability to try this. Nute Dooku with the GBA as the supporting tank source has felt really, really good. And we do this because the rest of the team, or the rest of our defense plan, has opened up more teams to not necessarily need to perform. You know, with the amount of teams that I was holding for offense, I oftentimes had a lot of overkill. So missing a Geo's team really didn't feel all that bad. But knowing that, you know, the GBA modding wasn't even necessarily that impressive, I don't think. Probably not even that good for the stat share for Brute. Yeah, we just have whatever ramshackle primaries were left sitting around. But the fact that we have this, you know, around 282-ish speed, we have the Brute here with the pre-taunts. Dooku, I did give him, you know, some extra speed budget that I could, but you do have this kind of more durable, you know, we have a pre-taunt, which if you're running Maniguard B1, B2, seen plenty, you know, Django, all sorts of versions that people will stick in here aren't necessarily giving you that early peel for Nute or Dooku, but then also certainly don't have the flexibility or the survivability or the repeatability or the self-cleansing factor that a Geonosian Brood Alpha would. And it's also fun to note that because this is a setup where we have a tank in the 3rd slot, but it's not actually the tank, Dooku is going to take Master Makashi and put Brood Alpha himself into stealth. Just a small detail that I appreciate. I have seen some stats that it is being run slightly on SJWH.GG, but certainly not as much as I was hoping. Yeah, it's just one of those things where if you can fit it in, I have had really good results with it so far, and even paired with everything else, it actually kind of contributed to me getting my last win in the 3 GL versus 4 matchup. He ended up holding with something like 12 holds up top, although I think they might have just been gas at this point. But yeah, really stand by it, really feel good about it. I feel good about all of these. Yeah, if you can try even just 1 or 2, I would say absolutely check it out. You can try all of them. I think it's been a complete blast. So yeah, hopefully you're as interested in these as I am. I know we're kind of at the end of this 3v3 season, but you know, these are older characters. I don't think a new Galactic Legends would really disrupt any of these. And honestly, cannot wait to see how they do in the next 3v3 season. I don't want to go back to 3v3 yet, but if we, you know, we don't get to control, CG will bring it back whenever. And when we do, I will happily grab some popcorn and see how they do again next season. So yeah, that's it for this. Hope you all enjoy. Peace out.